forward to hearing it. We have a tall ship coming in, end of the month. Bob Cronin is also the chair of that committee. He's going to go into much detail about the activities around the tall ship. Our next first rider will be given by the crew of the tall ship, so please attend. That will be out back under the tent, and you'll be able to get a preview and ask any question you want of the ship and the crew itself. That's going to be a fantastic presentation also. Yes, it will be under the tent, absolutely. So we're going to have the tent up for probably the 10 days that the ship is here. So please come by, hang out, look at the ship, talk to people. It's going to be a great activity. He's going to go into some more detail about some of the educational programs, some of the activities surrounding it. We still have tickets available for the Welcome Aboard Party. So you can go online to our website and purchase those. Those are $85 a ticket. You can go online and purchase tickets for both family and individual packs. Bob, the mic's yours.
Really, before we get started, just a couple of things about the Nano Trinidad coming in. It's probably coming in with the high tide on Thursday the 29th, leaving with the tide on Monday, July 10th. In between, we have some exciting things going on. Obviously, there's a tour for individuals and families. I believe it's $15 for an adult, $30 for a family. Those will be every day. We have educational events in the mornings. 3 mornings with property services and River Valley Charter School. So that will get some of our local kids to interact with the boat crew, the ship crew on board. Also have some activities outside of that. Welcome Aboard Party that Chris just talked about. There are still some tickets available for it. That should be a good time. That'll give you access to the ship, the tent with music, cash bar, the museum, and then finally, one of the more important things is I'm sure many people in this room want a free red T-shirt, and you can get a free red Trinidad Maritime Days T-shirt by simply volunteering. We'd love to have some more volunteers, 3-hour stints, helping out, selling merchandise, keeping this place afloat, no pun intended. So you can see Chris, you can see myself, or you can see Kathleen to volunteer. And as they say, away we go. That picture behind me was when I had a part in a Marine unit. But right now we're talking about Newburyport, the sloop of war Wasp, and the War of 1812. The War of 1812 is really and truly America's second war of independence. And I think that's an important fact. Even though this rendering is a little bit older, Newburyport was a shipbuilding mecca on the East Coast. It was dotted with shipyards, wharfs, storage, inland a little bit, and everything that goes with it. To tell you how important Newburyport was to not only the area, but to the United States of America, think of Route 1. And Route 1 was at one point called the Newburyport Turnpike. And it went directly from downtown Newburyport to Boston. It didn't go through Salem. It didn't go through any other major North Shore town or city center. It came from here and it went to Boston. We were, in essence, a city-state. We were pretty self-sufficient. And I know I'm going to misspeak when I say Newburyport, because it was really Newbury and then the port side. But bear with me. I'm from Newburyport now. This is Newburyport. So, to start with, we've got to bounce around the dates a little bit, but it will make sense, hopefully, it makes sense to me. So the War of 1812 started June 1812. It was a war, quite frankly, that neither Great Britain or the United States wanted, but it happened. So in March of 1813, Congress authorized the building of 6 sloops of war. Sloop of war was basically a mini frigate. Maybe the best way to describe it would be in World War II terms. Constitution, let's say, was a destroyer. A sloop of war would be a destroyer escort. They're a little bit smaller, packed a little less punch, but had their own duties to perform. So when it was designed, the United States Navy knew about what was called the cruiser class of British warships, Royal Navy warships. And we had some serious issues. We really didn't have a big Navy. The Royal Navy was big. It ruled the seas. And 1805 and Trafalgar is not far in the rearview mirror. So U.S. sloops had to be fast, had to be class strong. In other words, to be able to go out and defeat the cruiser class, have high survivability, and be provisioned for extended cruising. But why? Because the fledgling U.S. Navy didn't have bases dotted around the world like the Royal Navy did. The Royal Navy, at the time of the War of 1812, had Halifax Station, had Bermuda, had Antigua. So completely surrounding the United States are Royal Navy naval bases capable of provisioning their ships at any time. So when Newburyport was, so in April, Secretary of the Navy, SecNav as we now call him, William Jones, set the process to begin the new ship, going to be named the Wasp, was unnamed at this point. He picked the Merrimack River location. He needed a secure boat yard, and the boat or the ship was not going to be the United States Navy's responsibility to defend or pay for it if something happened to it until it was totally delivered. The contract also said that Newburyport had to be capable of fitting out all of its stores exclusive of its batteries. So the batteries are kind of the great guns. So we'll talk about this more extensively, but they needed a harbor deep enough for the ship, all hands, guns, provisions to sail out of. Yeah. So Merrimack Court, or present-day Merrimack Court, was the site of construction at the Woodbridge and Merrill Shipyard. As you can see up here, got a pointer, but at the corner of Merrimack and Merrimack Court is the Merrill House, and you see the Courier House, the Car House, Car Island. So this whole area is just dotted with the history of Newburyport. When you come down here, you see Savory Lane's there right now. So the shipyard, which was Merrill Shipyard, with the arrows pointing to it, it was the 1813 location of where the Wasp was built. Orlando Merrill and Ralph Cross began construction of this sloop in the Merrill Shipyard. To the side, that's basic, the basic blueprint of the sloop. Cross ran the house side, the money side. Merrill was really the builder. And this is pretty interesting. So in May, they sign a contract. In June, they get the blueprints that were just shown. The Wasp was launched in September. So it was a 6-month contract to build this ship. And we're talking, obviously, 1813 technology. And they got this done in 5 months. The government paid $50 a ton. The Wasp was going to displace, or did displace, a little over 509 tons. So the construction cost was a whopping $25,461.05. Okay? As the ship was being built, it was built minus the great guns, I think, as I said. And the cordage came from Plymouth, when the most part was transported. The blocks and tackle were mostly from Boston, came up here. Sails came from Watertown. The wood came from up the river. And it was fir, pine, and oak is how it was built. And they cut the trees and just throw them in the river and float them down. The fir and pine we used for decking, we used for masts, we used for spars. The oak was for the hull itself. And if any of you live on the river, it appears that even to this day, people are cutting down trees and floating them down the river. But with that being said, the ship was designed to be approximately 120 feet long on deck, 31 and a half foot beam, which will come into play in a second, and had a crew of 173 officers, men, and boys. The armament was carronades and 2 long guns. Now, when I said that, it's carronades, it's not cannonades. Carronades were designed and developed by the Carron Iron Works in Scotland. They developed for the Royal Navy and really picked up as a incredible weapon. They were small, they were deadly, and the sailor's nickname of them was a smasher. So the Wasp had 11 gun ports per side. They were evenly spaced 6.5 feet apart, and so they had a shooting arc of 3 feet. So that was the main armament. Now on the left, you see the Wasp itself in a wood cutting. That ship has 3 masts, 4 main and mizzen. But if you notice, the sails are squared to the mast, square rigged ship, versus what's on the right, which some people would call a sloop today, even though this one is a replica of an older vessel, and the sails are rigged fore and aft. So I'm taking you right now back to high school. Okay, it's something that I was basically a history major. I've been doing naval history most of my life, and what they passed over in high school for the quasi-war is unbelievable. But this all comes down to this city and really the building we're in. So the quasi-war began in 1798 with the XYZ affair. And, you know, if you want to take XYZ affair for $200, basically what happened was the French Revolution occurred. They deposed the Bourbon king. The United States says, well, we owe you a lot of money for repayment for the American Revolution. But that was to the king. He's not around. So we aren't paying you. So we try to go and sit down at a discussion table with the revolutionary French government at the time, and they wanted to pay for play. They wanted us to pay money to sit down, and that really didn't go anywhere. So in October of 1798, French privateers began attacking American merchant ships. In 1799, the U.S. frigate Constellation captured a French frigate down in the Caribbean, the Insurgent. Now, as I think it was Sun Tzu said, an enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so the Royal Navy very much assisted the fledgling U.S. in shipping and helping protect our shipping. Just one quick last thing on the quasi-war. I do find this kind of interesting. that the three diplomats that we sent to France were Charles Pickney from South Carolina, and on a total accident, my wife actually booked us at the Pickney bed and breakfast while we were down there. John Marshall, future Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and from Marblehead, Eldridge Jerry. And Jerry became vice president, but he's certainly more famous for the gerrymandering and the original flag of the Don't Tread on Me flag turned into the gerrymandering flag. And if you look at that, you'll see Marblehead in there, you'll see Newburyport in there, and you'll see Andover in there, which is where I came from originally. So the important thing here is the quasi-war. We lost over 300 virtue vessels. That's not really a quasi-war. That's kind of significant. So in the path towards war, and I'll go through this very quickly because there will not be a test on this. Britain in 1806 declared a blockade of France. Napoleon's now in power, so he comes out with a Berlin Decree forbidding any neutrals to trade with Britain or their allies. Britain then comes back in 1807, and this gets really into the impressment issue of the whole 9 yards, requiring a license for anybody to trade with anybody has to go through Great Britain. And then France comes back with a Milan Decree, that Napoleon does, and says trade with Britain is an act of war. So you have this issue going on that is really throwing fuel on the fire of really what is becoming the first real world war. So the U.S. in their infinite wisdom begin with 1806, our own Non-Importation Act of British goods, and I was hopefully to stop impressment. It didn't. Then we tried the Embargo Act to ban all foreign trade. That didn't work, but more on that in half a second. And then the Non-Intercourse Act, which forbade trade with France or Britain. But here in Newburyport, as well as the rest of the country, there's a huge loss of maritime jobs, trade restrictions, recession, the whole nine yards. So one of the things that the crippled seafaring people of Newburyport did was to continue their intracoastal trade with numerous ships blown off course, ending up in Canada, the Bahamas, France, wherever, because they sprung a leak, they did this, and suddenly their cargo disappeared and they came back with other cargo. But of course, they couldn't really go through customs with that other cargo as they were supposed to have it, so there was a little issue there. So then everything kind of blew up with the HMS Leopard boarding the USS Chesapeake. This is 1807. Small boat left the Leopard. The Leopard was a 50-gun Royal Navy man of war, and a boarding party got on the Chesapeake, which is a 38-gun frigate. It was in U.S. territorial waters, so this is really a hostile act. They ordered the surrender of 4 sailors. The Chesapeake refused. Unfortunately for the Chesapeake, they had not beaten quarters. They were unprepared. Chesapeake, Leopard, and the Royal Navy were fully prepared. They fired 7 shots into the Chesapeake before she struck colors, leaving the Chesapeake with 3 dead, 18 wounded, and then they came on and took off with 4 sailors. 3 were U.S. citizens, and 1 was British. They were impressed. So I had touched on this. So with all these non-trade acts, we became the smuggler's den of the East Coast. And so we traded with Bermuda, Canada, as I said, there was the stresses of weather, and you can see I'm not going to get back into it, but you know, what we went outbound with, we came inbound with a lot of other things. So here we come to Sarah and David Emery, who thought they were ruined by all these embargoes and whatnot. And they had Emery's Tavern up in Boston Ave on High Street. Now the house was really called the Pillsbury House, and it burned in the late 1880s, but it was rented by Sarah and David. Sarah seemed to be the go-to person for smuggling. It was the hub from bringing cannonballs, clothing, everything, liquor from Canada by wagon. The revenue service at the time was probably down closer to like the Tuscan place, and the revenue enforcement officers would walk up to the tavern and have a couple of cocktails and leave. At one point, they had 15 wagons in the backyard heading for New York and Boston, full of smuggled goods, but they continued with that. And they also took, stuff off ships that were going into little coves, either Back Beach, as a matter of fact, used to be called Smuggler's Bay. And then it was called Whiskey Cove for a while, Polish. So it became a smuggler's den. So it was an open secret. The revenue cutter service was formed, and the first cutter in this models here of it was in Massachusetts. It was slow. It crew of 4, and it was here for about a year. They got rid of that and got a smaller boat, faster, smaller crew, to try to stop the smuggling. I don't think that really worked too well. But this is really a key slide when you think that in 1806, Newburyport's legal exports were almost $21.2 million in 1806 dollars. That's it's an incredible amount of money. And by 1813, we were at 1.8 illegal trade. So this place was absolutely devastated, and it was a true, if not recession. I don't know what you would call it. So one of the things here, just to take a look at, this is an old chart of the mouth of the Merrimack, and just take note how treacherous it is. I mean, you see it still today with the Plum Island coming and going, and whose houses and all that. But in here you see all these bars that these ships with no power had to transit. So you've got to keep that in mind. So as we said, June 18th, 1812, the war nobody wanted was declared in Great Britain. So Master Commandant Johnston Blakely was promoted from lieutenant and given command of the yet unnamed sloop of war. As we've said, the sloop of war was ship-rigged, square-rigged. The French called it a corvette, we called it a sloop. It was frigate-built, and it was rated for 18 guns. Blakely himself was captain of the Wasp. And again, if we're here for the Commander Farrell from the Constitution, she's a full commander of the United States Navy, but she is called captain because she is in charge of the Constitution, so it's an honorarium. But anyhow, so Captain Blakely, captain of the Wasp, born in Ireland, immigrated to the U.S. During the Revolution. They settled in Charleston. He went to UNC, Chapel Hill. He was entered service as a midshipman in 1800. He was a veteran of the First Boundary War. He was in anti-smuggling down the St. Mary's River, which was the border with Spanish Florida. He took a couple of prizes down there. He was promoted to lieutenant in 1807, and interestingly enough, he was assigned to the USS Argus, which was formerly the USS Merrimack. At one point, the Navy changed the name of the Merrimack to the Argus because they didn't like the name Merrimack. And for whatever reason, they obviously got a premonition because 50 or so years later, the next Merrimack didn't do too well when it was taken by the Confederates. So he then was given the command of the USS Enterprise. He was given command of the USS Enterprise. The Enterprise was based in the Maine region. And once he had left for his promotion, the Enterprise had been chasing the HMS Boxer. And this is where Pimlico Point comes into it. They met in the ship-to-ship battle, which I'm researching right now, and I won't go off on a total tangent, but the battle right off of Monhegan, Pimlico Point, two ships came together, the Enterprise and the Boxer. Both captains were killed, and the Americans prevailed, took hold of the Boxer, towed it into Portland, but both captains are buried side by side in a cemetery in Portland. And I've recently been inducted into a member of the 1805 Society, and I was talking to some of colleagues in Britain via email, and they had no idea that these two officers were buried side by side. It's truly an amazing feat. It's a huge funeral up there, but maybe if I come back, we can talk about that. Blakely arrives in Newburyport in late 1813. Lieutenant George Parker was overseeing the construction. He took up residence at Locke's Hotel, which was at State and High Street, and was also the residence of George Peabody. He's a banker, investor, entrepreneur, and he funded all the Wasp's guns with their great guns. He's also the person Peabody, Massachusetts is named after, and obviously the Peabody Essex Museum bears his name as well. At the time, it was the Peabody Academy of East India Maritime Society. So, with the keel laid in June, Blakely arrives in August, September. HMS Boxer is defeated, and in September, USS Wasp is launched. This comes as a quote from the Newburyport Herald. From the rocks and sands and enemy's hands, God save the Wasp. So I'm not going to read through this, but this is the ad that's in the paper. Again, the Newburyport Herald. And Blakely quickly took on a crew of seasoned, if not Navy men, but seasoned sailors, because there was no work. So, as you can see in the last line, all able-bodied seamen will receive 2 months' pay in advance. This was huge, especially if they were married with kids. So, sloop of war Wasp. On the left is what we call the long gun. The other is that carronade I was talking about. And here, just another example. That's carronade on the left of the Constitution, and they use those along with their long guns. And that's another picture of a depiction of a 32-pound carronade. Wasp had 12-pound long gun. Supposed to have 2 of them, And the Constitution frigate had 24-pound long guns, so significantly bigger. One of the interesting things here is that the crew would fight both sides of the ship. So if you were assigned to number 3 cannon, and they usually had names like Killer or whatever, or Roseanne, you would, if you were the number 3 cannon, and you were on the port side, you'd run to the starboard side if the battle was on that side, so you went back and forth. So here's really the difference. So the 12-pounders, 10-man crew, 85-man minimum, at a range of 1,000 yards, so you could stand off a little bit. 3 shots every 5 minutes was optimal, but they were heavy. A 12-pounder was, now I'm really going off on a tangent. You see the rain out here? This is when the officer of the deck blows a whistle and says, "Get up there and short the sail." and the crew scrambles up 180 feet off the ground, or off the deck, I should say. So then, when you think about that, it's pretty hair-raising. But anyhow, the long guns were about 3,800 pounds, or 5 foot, 4 inches long. They were a wheel carriage, so the recoil was held by rope. Carronades, on the other hand, 32-pound, 4 to 6-man crew, very short range, more shotgun than anything else, 500 yards, but the rate of fire was 3 times as fast as a long gun, less expensive to manufacture, less iron, 2/3 lighter, so you get a 32-pounder, and if you did a long gun, at 32 pounds, you might be talking, because it might be 10,000 pounds. So this kept your firepower superior with losing. The only thing you're losing is really range, but you're so much lighter. You can do it. You use 1/3 less powder, and they were mounted on slides. If you noticed that before, so the recoil was a little different. So here are the type of projectiles used. You have round shot, you have grape shot, which is more for clearing decks, canister, again, more for clearing decks, and then chain shot and bar shot. The chain and bar we use for cordage and sails to kind of destroy that part of the ship. That was very French. The French Navy did a lot of trying to ruin sail plans and cordage, where the British kind of tried to shoot between what they would call wind and water, so into the hull. The interesting thing here, though, is after the War of 1812, James Fenimore Cooper, who was a midshipman early in the war and was mostly stationed up in New York at the Great Lakes and that type of battle, did a comparison, and our munitions were so inferior to the British. It's amazing that we were as successful as we were. We had so many voids in some of this hardware that an 18-pound gun, the projectile was 15 pounds, 16 pounds, not 18. In other words, you might be losing a gun per side just in weight, and that's weight is what made you win. So back to the Wasp, and we're rolling through this. Wasp, after its launch upriver at Merrimack Port, is brought downriver basically to Center Street area, and both sides of the river are totally loaded with people as they bring the ship down. And so lately, Size is going to have a VIP ball, a welcome aboard party. Ours is $85. I think it's free, but we still invite you to come to board party. The center of the ballroom was illuminated by the ornate capstan with customary pyramid light arranged with singular taste unquestionable. So that was from the New Report Herald, but it was really, really a big deal in town. The capstan is, that's what the gill was. The capstan is really what was used to weigh anchor. The slots there, you put a sturdy piece of wood in there, and that's where you would have the ship's crew winding up the anchor. So here you have where it was at Atwood's Way, or Atwood's Wharf. It was honored the late President Washington. And the capstan that they showed, he was also surrounded by muskets and bayonets and festooned by evergreens. The takeaway here is, everybody had a good time because the smugglers donated the best, the best brandy they could get out of France and rum and whatever. So a good time was had by all. But on a more serious note, I decided to use the slide that shows this gray out area was the Great Fire of 1811. So just another kick at the city of Newburyport, losing all this money, and most of our downtown is pretty well taken out. Just as another tangent that my wife and I go off on all the time, if you look at Middle Street, the fire stops right at Middle Street at right near Thayer. Right down the street from that is the birthplace of William Nichols, the Holy Terror, whose info is downstairs. I forget the word for the statue. His statue is downstairs. And that house is still there. It's probably one of the most historic houses in New York, and people miss it all the time. So, living aboard, each of the 3 lieutenants would have 30 square feet for all their stuff, plus an area to sleep. The purser, sailing master, surgeon were on the other side of the area, again, 30 square feet. The central gun room, they always used to call it, it's now a ward room, but at the time it was a gun room. That's where those lieutenants and the warrant officers would eat and spend their spare time. They had 8 young gentlemen on board, commonly called midshipmen now, which shared 13 feet of linear deck, including the mainmast and general storage lockers. So they had really nothing. So they were really pigeonholed in there. That area would also be used as a surgical area in times of battle. And the surgeon would just bring out walkers, lay people on, and do what he had to do. Sailmaker, the crew's quarters, and this is pretty impressive. Crew's quarters, 150 men measured 45 by 30. And you're really not talking about showers. The other warrant officers that had a little more room, sailmaker, gunner, bosun, cooper, carpenter, all kind of hung their hammocks in their storerooms. Just as a quick example, the gunner, for instance, had to keep all the cannon work in order, keep the powder dry, swords, pikes, bayonets, muskets, tomahawks, knives. They all came under his purview. The other thing under his purview is way in the back of this room are the manacles. Manacles for prisoners of war taken off other ships, or for sailors on their own ship that were placed under arrest close enough for whatever reason. So that was basically the cruise. The captain's quarters, and I used a little spelling, was the great cabin in the aftermost portion of the berth deck. Had 6 feet of headroom, which is pretty amazing when you go in the Constitution, if you haven't been there lately. If you're too much over 5'2", you're hitting your head. And rumor has it, another tangent, rumor has it that the French put pom-poms on their stocking caps to cushion the blow of hitting their heads on beams. But anyhow, the captain had a private skylight amidships that enabled him to obviously see better, but he could actually hear what was going on topside. Under that was a chart table, a stateroom cot secured writing desk. Most of the captains basically had the carpenter build them a bed that they hung. So it's a little more comfortable than they had. And the ships hold everything that they needed. Interestingly enough, is the second thing, the 221 oak barrels constructed by Jonathan Boardman. Now, Boardman Street is one end in the north end. The cost of the 221 oak barrels is $1,500. You go to Corliss now and try to buy a half barrel from your yard, and it's probably going to cost you $1,500. In those barrels, though, water, and water really wasn't that potable after a while, so that's where they mixed it with rum, which became grog, which is known as grog. A lot of times, the British would do what they call blackstrap, it was near beer. That was more in the Mediterranean. And then it also do salt meat, so you'd have pork on Monday, salt beef on Tuesday, salt pork on, so they alternated that, and then you'd have a banyan day, which was just dried vegetables. And, so then there were some days that were meatless. So war split leaves Newburyport in February. There were rumors abounding that the Royal Navy was going to try to come in and cut out the ship. That just means they're going to take it by surprise by a small boat. There were rumors also at the time that the British had landed on Plum Island and were marching to town. So with all these rumors going on, they said, hey, let's get out of Dodge. We'll either go to Boston or we'll go to Portsmouth, because both of those places have forts, and we really didn't. So out the mouth of the river they go, almost, and they had to take off 8 carronades. They had to remove all the shot, put it in support ships and barges. They transit the Newbury Bar. Once they clear, some gunboats out there with one cannon protecting the area. Supplies were transferred back. They got to Portsmouth the same day with no loss of life or anything like that. This is one of my quick tangents, because everybody's heard of it, but nobody really knows what it is. So in 1800, the U.S. Navy policy, captain, officers, and crew received 1/2 of the assessed value of any prize they captured. The captain, officer, and crew would receive 100% if it was a superior force. I know I'm going to go over that, so push through this. Captain, if he was on an independent cruise, like the Wasp would be on, we'd get 15%. If he was in a squadron or under the command of a commodore or whatever, that commander would get 5%. He was that 5% share. Sailing master, captain of Marines, would get 10% share and split it. You can read the rest. The interesting thing here is, the crew itself had to split, 35%. So, they're getting $5 or whatever. Right? It was big money in those days. But then there was a little remainder, which is the agent's fee for negotiating with either the government or negotiating with a boatyard that wanted to buy out the prize. So finally, the Wasp departs Portsmouth after 2 months of provisioning and training. When they depart, some men had already run, as they say, which we would now say they absolutely without leave and desertion. One man is discharged dead, and in the logbook would be a DD next to his name. A spot fell on his head and he was killed. And 2 of the midshipmen were dismissed. 1 was drummed out of the Navy for drunkenness, and the other was transferred to another ship, but they refilled the complement. So the WASP continues its departure with 173 donkeys and/or ship servants. So as they're heading to Europe, they bump into a French national ship and says Napoleon has abdicated, the war is over. So our war is over, but now the WASP knows that every single ship in the British Navy is now facing west. They're still going east to British shores and western approaches. So in the month of June, they take 5 prizes. Most of them they burn or scuttle. They release one with all the prisoners on it, and they continue their war cruise. Now remember, this is right off of the Royal Navy's home in Britannia Rules of Waves. This is pretty embarrassing to the Royal Navy that this one ship was created out. So on the 28th of June, WASP meets HMS Reindeer, which is that cruiser class that I've talked about ad nauseum. The painting that you see here is pretty interesting. It currently hangs, and has for a while, in the United States Marine Corps Commandant's office, because the Marines are so prevalent in this painting. But the interesting thing is, if you count it, there's 6 of them, and there were 5 Marines on board. I've actually emailed a Marine Corps historian, and I'm waiting for a response on that. Haven't really gotten it yet. So we've done the WASP pretty much over and over. But Reindeer is that cruiser class, but it's built of fur, so it's not as hardened as the WASP, and it's lighter armament and a smaller crew. But, and I'm not going to do this line by line here, but if you look at this, this isn't like, Master and Commander or some of the things you see on TV. 4 a.m., Reindeer sights an unknown sail. Well, it takes until 2:30 in the afternoon for them to even get within range of considering a battle. They're doing a dance, who's going to get the wind gauge, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. But with all of that, at 2:30, Reindeer turns into it, and it begins. At 3:15, just 45 minutes short of 12 hours, Reindeer fires its first carronade. We double shot it at 60 yards. WASP returns fire. The captain, master and commander, because we were master and commandant, they were master and commander for the Royal Navy, is wounded. The official report says WASP and Reindeer are embraced. In other words, they're now side by side, and the boarding action is going to take place. Manners goes down by musket fire. Their first lieutenant and lieutenants were in both navies. First lieutenant, second lieutenant, third lieutenant, fourth lieutenant, depends on the size of the ship. So the first lieutenant is in charge, he goes down. Reindeer's boarding fails. WASP boards Reindeer, and 1 minute later, Reindeer strikes. Now, how do we know all these times? Because the captain's clerk, while all this is going on, is pacing the quarterdeck with a watch, writing down for the log of everything that's going on, while, musket fire is cracking all around him, and he's writing all this down. So that's how we know. This action lasts 24 minutes and 19 minutes from WASP's first shot. And you can see the butcher's bill, and Reindeer is so disabled that it's just burnt and sinks. WASP continues its patrol, takes another few ships out, and pulls into France, Le Orient, on July 7th. Now, they're neutral now. They shouldn't be doing anything other than looking at stuff, maybe a little water to get out of there. No, they treat them like kings. They're there for about a month, a little over a month, and they totally restock the boat, rearm the boat, do everything they can to the ship, and wash the parts for the second part of its war patrol. Sinks a few more ships, and then fateful day, for 1 September 1814. Picture a convoy of 10 ships, escorted by a ship of the line, a 74-gun ship of the line from the Royal Navy called the Amanda. And Wasp goes in, cuts out the brig Mary, and gets away with it, and doesn't even get the Amanda 74 gun doesn't even get a shot off. Later in the day, Wasp continues and bumps into HMS Avon, another cruiser class. She's a little bit stronger with 16 32-pound carronades, but she had a refit. She had a new copper bottom, and she was oak constructed, unlike the Reindeer that was fur. And the master commander was the Honorable James Barthmont for history. So again, I'm not going to kill you with this. They get into, again, a sea battle one-on-one. The interesting thing here, however, is Avon keeps signaling one of its other ships, and the ship doesn't get there in time. And so the Avon strikes its colors, and approximately 1/3 of the ship's company is lost to wounds or killed in action. Wasp, Butcher Bill is 3 wounded, while Avon is 10 killed and 29 wounded. They had to sink Avon. Wasp escapes Castilian and another consort. It continues its war patrol. They do 3 more. Several lucky sailors of a prize crew from the Wasp get on the recently captured armed brig, Atlanta, and they sail for home. And this is one of the reasons we have all this information, is all the reports were sent back via the Atlanta. And on October 9th, Wasp meets a neutral Swedish vessel, boards her, they talk, and the Wasp tells them they're heading to the Caribbean. And the USS sloop of war Wasp is never heard from again. So the war ends in 1814, and next year it's ratified. Interesting thing is the parties agree to status quo antebellum, meaning after the war everything is the same. There's no agreement on impressment, although it stops. There's no agreement on free trade, although free trade is now what's going on in the world. Britain considers these 2 things dead letters. And I remember reading one history book, I forget which British admiral made this statement, but at just about this time he said, I think we're going to have to look out for these Yankees. They're pretty good. So this comes from the book by Theodore Roosevelt, Naval War of 1812. And I certainly don't want to stand up here and contradict Captain Farrell that I think the Constitution is 30 or 33 victories, which it does. But in the War of 1812, by ship, you can see that Peacock and Wasp are tied for 15 captures apiece. The asterisk here is Wasp had 1 captain, likely. Peacock had at least 2, and maybe at least 3 captains. So Wasp by itself was the head and shoulders victor of kills in the War of 1812. So finally, it takes a while, Wasp is gone, it's lost. So Congress issues a thanks to Congress and the Congressional Gold Medal. Every once in a while you can actually find one of these for about $500 on eBay. If if anybody's looking for a Christmas gift for me. Blakely is promoted to captain. His wife has given a presentation steward, and Sterling Silver tea set, which is now serviced. It's now at Chapel Hill. There's been 3 Navy ships named for him, 4 towns. There's an elementary school on Bainbridge Island, in Bainbridge, Washington. And of course, Bainbridge was one of the captains of the Constitution. In 1816, an agent from the United States government came to Newburyport with $50,000 of prize money to be divided by the heirs of the Wasp's crew, which, again, the ship, when it was built in 1813, cost $25,000. So they're bringing double the cost of the ship to the families of the crew lost on the Wasp. They also gave an additional 12 months of pay, which is pretty significant. And I have them here, copies of both the mustard roll from the Wasp. And when you see it, almost everything is Newburyport, 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 and Marblehead, Newburyport, Newburyport. Really, in closing, the Wasp was not only named the Wasp because they like to name ships like Hornet, Wasp, for like, the little fire plug that punches. The entire crew, with probably maybe excepting some of the officers, were in fact white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So it was truly the Wasp. But that's really the story. There's all kinds of rumors of what may have happened to it, but the determination was it was lost at sea in the storm. Went down to all and that is all. And sadly to say, there's not one mention in Newburyport of wars. Up until now, I'd love to see something happen. But if anybody's got a question, that's fine. I know I ran a little long, so thank you very much.